There was no declaration of war, just explosions in the distance and bodies left behind. Not a movie script, not a video game. This is reality. Raw, unfiltered, and terrifying. It began in silence, interrupted only by the low rumble of fighter jets and the sudden flashes of light across the night sky. In Isfahan, Iran, families were preparing for evening prayer when the first missile hit. In Tel Aviv, sirens wailed just seconds before impact. In both cities, children screamed. Elderly were carried on shoulders. Hospitals lost power. The targets were not just military, a nuclear facility here, a power grid there, but also apartment blocks, TV stations, roads filled with fleeing civilians. No flags raised, no war councils convened. Only the cold efficiency of modern warfare, remote, silent, and deadly. Why is no one stopping this? Where is the outrage? The statements of condemnation? The urgent calls for restraint? Instead, the world scrolls on, half numb, half in denial. Perhaps because the pain feels too far, or perhaps because the truth is too close. One thing is clear: the price is not paid by presidents or generals, but by the ordinary. Mothers, students, shopkeepers. And so, we must ask, how did we let it come to this? And what if this is just the beginning? To truly grasp today's unfolding crisis, we must rewind decades to the invisible chessboard where suspicion, ambition, and silent warfare have long collided. Since the 1970s, Israel has followed a policy of nuclear ambiguity, refusing to confirm or deny possession of nuclear weapons, but widely believed to hold up to 90 nuclear warheads, according to estimates by the Federation of American Scientists. This opacity is strategic, a shield of deterrence, never declared but deeply feared. Iran, meanwhile, has long insisted its nuclear program is peaceful. Its uranium enrichment facilities in Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan were built under international scrutiny. But after the U.S. withdrew from the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, Iran accelerated enrichment beyond limits. In 2023, IAEA reports confirmed uranium had been enriched up to 83.7%, near weapons grade. For Israel, that marked a red line crossed. Former Israeli PM Naftali Bennett once said, "A nuclear Iran is not a challenge. It is a threat to our very survival." Iran's military reach extends through non-state proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthi rebels. These groups act as Tehran's arms in asymmetric warfare, launching missiles, drones, and rocket attacks on Israeli and Gulf targets. This axis of resistance ties regional instability directly to Iran's strategic goals. Behind the scenes, Mossad's hand is unmistakable, linked to cyber attacks like Stuxnet and the assassination of figures like Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, Iran's top nuclear scientist. In response, Iran has ramped up cyber warfare and retaliatory strikes. This is not merely a military rivalry. It is a multi-front Cold War, waged with code, proxies, and fear. June 12 to 13, Israel's opening salvos. The assault began without warning. In the dead of night, Israeli warplanes crossed into Iranian airspace via stealth corridors long mapped by Mossad's intelligence infrastructure. Within minutes, over 100 coordinated airstrikes rained down on strategic Iranian military and nuclear installations. Targets included centrifuge facilities at Natanz and Isfahan, IRGC bases in Qom and Yazd, residential compounds suspected to house nuclear scientists, air defense installations, and radar hubs guarding Fordo. An IDF spokesperson described the mission's goal as to degrade, destroy, and remove the threat, posed by Iran's advancing nuclear capabilities. Satellite surveillance suggests Israel employed rampage missiles and Harop loitering munitions, designed to penetrate hardened structures with high precision. This was not a warning, it was a rollback, said retired Israeli General Amos Yadlin in an interview with Channel 12 News. Iran was nearing the point of no return. In a significant shift, the United States entered the battlefield. Under direct authorization from President Trump, 2 B-2 Spirit bombers departed from White Man Air Force Base and dropped 14 massive ordnance penetrators, each weighing over 30,000 pounds, aimed at deeply fortified bunkers in Fordow, Isfahan, and Kashan. Simultaneously, 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from U.S. naval vessels in the Persian Gulf targeted Iranian radar arrays and communications relays. Though Iran's UN ambassador later confirmed there was no nuclear leakage, he condemned the attack as a grave violation of sovereignty. Commercial satellite imagery from Planet Labs and Maxar Technologies showed multiple impact craters near nuclear sites, with subterranean structures visibly collapsed. Despite global fears, U.S. intelligence officials reassured investors that no nuclear material had been dispersed, at least not yet. But Iran's promise was unequivocal. This program does not end here. Within just 6 hours of the U.S.-Israeli strikes, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, initiated a counteroffensive. Multiple Fateh 110 missiles and Zolfaghar short-range ballistic missiles were launched toward central Israel, striking Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, and Petah Tikva. According to Israeli health officials, at least 12 civilians were killed and over 70 wounded, some critically, including children. IRGC spokesperson General Abolfazl Shekarki issued a fiery statement, calling the U.S.-Israel operation a clear war crime and vowing legal retaliation under Article 51 of the UN Charter, which recognizes a nation's right to self-defense. This aggression will not go unanswered, warned Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi on Press TV. The consequences will be enduring. We reserve every legal, diplomatic, and military option. Iran's government formally filed a complaint with the UN Security Council, demanding condemnation of what it called blatant violations of sovereignty. Almost in synchrony, Iran's network of allies sprang into motion. In Gaza, Hamas launched over 300 rockets into southern Israel, temporarily shutting down Ashkelon port. In Lebanon, Hezbollah artillery units fired toward northern Israel, prompting evacuations in Kiryat Shmona. Most notably, the Houthi movement in Yemen claimed to have fired a hypersonic missile at Ben Gurion International Airport, which briefly suspended operations. Though Israel claimed successful interception, the Houthis asserted otherwise, calling it a proof of strategic reach. A senior Houthi official told Newsweek, "If Iran bleeds, we burn borders." Despite the ferocity, Iran has avoided direct confrontation with the U.S. mainland or Gulf bases. Instead, its proxies serve to apply pressure without triggering a full-scale war. This reflects what analysts call an escalate to de-escalate strategy, maximizing deterrence while minimizing justification for broader intervention. But the chessboard is now active, and every move carries global consequences. The human toll is mounting. In Iran, official state media confirmed at least 78 fatalities, with over 320 injured in Natanz, Isfahan, and Yazd. Many were civilians, technicians, scientists, and even children caught near impact zones. Hospitals in Isfahan reportedly ran short on medical supplies within hours, as power outages paralyzed emergency response. In Israel, emergency services recorded dozens injured from missile strikes in Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, and Herzliya. While Israel's Iron Dome intercepted the majority of projectiles, several slipped through, damaging residential buildings. Local media confirmed 2 to 3 civilian deaths, including an elderly woman in South Tel Aviv. In Yemen, Houthi claimed hypersonic missile strikes caused brief chaos at Ben Gurion International Airport. Though Israeli authorities reported no casualties, thousands of travelers were stranded as international flights were cancelled or rerouted. In Iran, early analysis by Reuters and Maxar satellite imagery shows entire centrifuge halls at Natanz and Fordow flattened. Debris fields and collapsed roofs suggest the success of U.S. bunker-buster munitions. Meanwhile, rolling blackouts and internet outages rippled through central provinces, prompting fears of cyber attack overlays. In Israel, the missile barrage damaged parts of urban infrastructure, including electrical substations and a central telecom hub in Ramat Gan, which briefly affected internet and cell services. On the streets of Tehran, reactions were divided. Thousands rallied outside parliament, waving Iranian flags and chanting, "Death to America," in support of retaliation. Yet smaller counter-protests emerged quietly, young Iranians holding signs reading, "No war in our name." This internal rift reflects a society split between nationalistic defiance and war weariness, with civilians once again trapped in the crossfire of decisions made far above their heads. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage through which nearly 20% of the world's crude oil flows, has once again become a pressure point for the global economy. Following the coordinated airstrikes on Iran, Brent crude prices spiked by 8% on June 22, reaching their highest point since late 2022, according to data from AP News and Bloomberg. If the strait is compromised, even partially, we are looking at an energy crisis on a scale not seen since the 1970s, warned Clara Hensley, senior analyst at the International Energy Institute. Economists caution that prolonged instability in the Gulf could derail post-COVID recovery efforts, with inflation rising globally and developing countries hit hardest by fuel and food price shocks. With airspace over Iran, Iraq, and parts of the Gulf closed, major airlines including Emirates, Lufthansa, and Singapore Airlines were forced to reroute, causing widespread flight cancellations and delays. Shipping routes are also impacted, with multiple cargo vessels diverting from Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman, disrupting supply chains from Asia to Europe. Logistics firms like Maersk and DHL have issued alerts on expected delivery slowdowns across multiple continents. At the United Nations, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he was gravely alarmed, urging all parties to pursue immediate de-escalation. Russia and China denounced the U.S. and Israeli strikes as aggressions under international law, calling instead for a return to the JCPOA framework. In Europe, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer called on all sides to step back from the brink, while French and German foreign ministers convened an emergency session. In Latin America, governments in Venezuela and Bolivia condemned the strikes as imperialist overreach. Conversely, Argentina's President Javier Milei issued a rare note of support for U.S. involvement, citing the global necessity of deterrence. Back home, cracks are widening in the U.S. political response. Representative Thomas Massie, RK, criticized the administration for acting without congressional approval, calling the strikes reckless and legally questionable. Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security issued alerts for heightened domestic threats, citing the potential for cyber retaliation on U.S. critical infrastructure and large-scale protests in major urban centers. We now stand at a dangerous precipice, perhaps the most volatile since the Cold War. The most feared path is already forming. Should Iran intensify missile salvos or if it's proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, or militias in Iraq and Syria, expand attacks on U.S. troops, embassies, or naval assets, the United States may be forced into full-scale military engagement. All it takes is one miscalculated strike on a U.S. base in Qatar or Bahrain, and Article 5 rhetoric starts sounding very real, warned Dr. Elias Harrow, a regional security analyst at the Council on Foreign Relations. UN officials, according to internal sources from the Wall Street Journal, have already begun contingency talks for a multinational ceasefire force, fearing a potential proxy-fueled World War III if escalation continues unchecked. Alternatively, Iran may choose to continue its escalate to de-escalate approach, intensifying military pressure just enough to extract diplomatic concessions while avoiding direct warfare. However, this balance is razor-thin. A misfired missile hitting a school or an embassy could push either side across the threshold of restraint. The region has too many actors with too many weapons and not enough breaks, noted Layla Farhadi, Middle East researcher for foreign policy. There remains a fragile window for de-escalation. Former President Trump hinted at regime change rhetoric, but analysts suggest that Iran's supreme leader Khamenei may lean toward strategic patience, particularly if Russia and China broker a face-saving diplomatic exit. Moscow and Beijing are currently lobbying within the UN Security Council for emergency multilateral talks, urging all parties to recommit to non-proliferation frameworks like the JCPOA. This is not someone else's war. It affects your daily life, from prices at the gas pump to the safety of U.S. service members stationed abroad. It threatens the stability of Europe, the global South, and the integrity of international law itself. In the words of UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, there is no military solution. The only path forward is diplomacy. If the leaders of today fail to listen, if they let missiles speak louder than dialogue, we may soon face a crisis that no nation can extinguish and no future generation can forget.